Hey, this is the Daily Overpass. My name is Eric and I make apps. Now today I want to talk about Milestone Birthdays and what am I doing with my life? This past week, a member of my family turned 40, had a big milestone birthday. So I sent her an email on her birthday. I know I should have sent a card. I'm really terrible about sending birthday cards. The thing is, you have to send it all the way from England. I have to go to the post office to find out how much it costs, all that kind of stuff, and it takes like a week, and I'm just really bad about it. But I did send an email on the day. So I sent her an email saying, hey, happy birthday. I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you. I hope you have a great day. And hey, this is like a big birthday for you, isn't it? You're turning 40 today. And she emailed back saying, yeah, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, right? And I kind of laughed a bit because, when it comes to those milestone birthdays, nobody is more neurotic than I am, right? Every time I've had one of those birthdays in the past, it's been like this huge thing, like a huge drama to everyone around me because, I just can't let it go. Right now I'm 45. When I turned 45, that was fine, right? In fact, I'm kind of getting used to being a little bit older, right? Somebody sent me an email a few weeks ago and they said, it was a younger person who was just starting out in apps, and he said, you're like my YouTube dad, right? And I thought, YouTube dad, not brother, not nothing else, but okay, I guess, I get it. When you're 45, you can't hide it anymore. But, when I turned 30, I can remember when I turned 30, I was like 29 and I had like a year to go. And I can remember talking to somebody and he was like in his early 30s, right? And to me, I thought I didn't consider us to be, that different in terms of age, but he was past the 30 threshold, right? And I was talking to him about it. I said, God, I can't believe, next year I'm going to turn 30, right? And it wasn't so much that, I feared, adding, having that age, right? That's not what it's about. It's that, what have I been doing with my life? That was the concern, thinking, God, when my parents were 30, they were, blah, 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 and you start comparing yourself to all these other people, right? And even for like today, I'm so glad that I wasn't, you got like Zuckerberg and everything. I'm sure there's loads of people in technology out there who are constantly looking at Zuckerberg thinking, I'm a failure because I didn't, wasn't hit success when I was, whatever, 20 something. But anyway, so when I turned 30, right? So what he said to me was, he said, Eric, you know what? When I turned 30, yeah, I was a bit stressed about it, but I made it through it, and I'm fine. It's just one of those things. It's just a milestone. You get through it, right? See, I didn't have any trouble. I'm fine, right? And I remember thinking, and this is terrible to say this, right? But I remember thinking, yeah, but I don't want to be like you, right? I want to be like super successful, right? I wanted to be super successful by the time I was 30. Right? But I wasn't. So anyway, when I turned 30, around this time, I was working in a job that I really couldn't stand. I was going into an office every day and I was just like, I just can't stand this place, right? And I was a permanent employee. I'd been there for a few years, and you know what? I hated the place after 1 month. Like, I knew I had to leave, and I was like looking for other jobs, but nothing was really, nothing ever came up. And we were going into the office, and it was just soul destroying. Like, you go in, and it's just like your shoulders slump. You're just like, God, like it's like you leave your personality at the door. One of those kind of places, right? It just was not, was not a good experience. So when I turned 30, I think the first thing I did was I started taking like Taekwondo classes. I started taking like, I enrolled in Taekwondo, and I did it for like 3 years, right? So I'm at 30 years old, I'm going down to learn Taekwondo, and there were some other, grown-ups there, but there were a lot of kids. So like you're 30 years old, and there's like 10 and 12-year-olds with you, and you're all this kind of stuff. That was one of the things I did. And eventually, I ended up quitting that job, right? I ended up quitting without having anything else to go to. It was like this, I was just so fed up with the whole thing. And I've talked about all this before. It was actually a really traumatic experience, right? I talked about it I did a video called Getting to Where You Weren't Supposed to Be, or something, like way back in the early daily ones, right? So, which I talked about all that, but so the big thing about that was I'd quit that job and I went out and I became a contractor, and luckily everything worked out, but there was a few months there of being in really bad shape, right? Just, struggling for money, all this kind of stuff. But in the end, I became a contractor, and then I started Overpass. And even though, that first 10 years of Overpass, I hardly ever did anything except for take on contract jobs. I mean, I set up the website and all that kind of stuff, but, never did anything, right? Now, when I turned 40, the whole thing, neurosis kicked into action again, right? So when I turned 40, like just before I turned 40, there were several things that just made me start to feel really, really old. The first was I was working as a contractor for this company, and we were doing some pretty cool stuff, working with different stuff. But they said we're going to change direction and we're going to start working with SharePoint, because SharePoint's really awesome, right? So I started working with SharePoint. And if you haven't used a SharePoint in a corporate environment, okay, this is my opinion. Don't get upset. I think it is the most sluggish, boring piece of software in the world. Nobody hates SharePoint more than I did. I was just something like when you're working with something where you can't do anything that's cool anymore. Everything's like, oh, document management. Oh, look at the business cases of this, all this kind of stuff. And everything was just, and it performed slowly. You didn't have a lot of control over the interface, all this kind of stuff. And you're working with technology that was actually, several years older and didn't keep up with everything else. You're working with this big system, this mainframe system. And it just felt like work was just sort of this, like it was just, everything was just running slowly. The second thing was right before a few months before I turned 30, or probably about a month before I turned 40, I threw my back out, right? It was like, because when you're a contractor, you're always working in offices a lot of times, so you're going there, and unlike a permanent employee where you, based on your seniority, you get the best seat, right? Everybody knows where the best seat is with the adjustable and everything. So I had a seat that was like broken, and I always got the worst seat. But that's like, you get paid a lot, which is good, but you always get the worst seat, which is, I'll take it, whatever. So I was sitting there, and then after a while my back started to hurt, right? And it just started, just this lower back pain, right? And I wasn't exercising a lot. I wasn't, I'd go for runs every so often, but I wasn't doing a lot, I wasn't doing any back exercises, right? And then just, one day my back completely gave out. It was one of those where you have the spasms that go up your back, and just like, you take a step, it's just like, I remember I couldn't walk. I called in sick, and I was like working from home. Like, it's, you're bad when you have to call in sick, working from home. I can't breathe, right? And it was just, and I had to go see the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you're just getting older or whatever. So, he says, these kind of things happen. You do these exercises and everything. And, so now I'm very careful about my back. I do, hyperextensions when I'm at the gym, and, go to the gym and all this kind of stuff. But back then it was just like, I had back problems, I was, working with SharePoint. And the other thing was, we went on the summer holiday. We always go, like, we went to China one year. We went to, we go back to the States a lot, obviously. And then this year we did what my wife, she always wanted to go on a canal boat holiday, which I don't know if you guys have ever been on a canal boat or seen canal boats like in England, but there's these canals, and you get these boats that go like, 2 miles an hour, and it's leisurely and relaxing and therapeutic, and just, it's like, it made me feel much older. There I was on the canal boat, steering this canal boat, just feeling old, right? So when I turned 40, the first thing I did was I had this beard. I was growing a beard for like 6 or 7 years. Like, so people just knew me, I had this beard, right? But it was turning all gray and everything. The first thing I did was I shaved that thing off, right? And then, eventually I ended up, and then I also released the app. That was my first app, was like when I turned 40. It was just right before that I started looking at other things, thinking, I got to start investing in something. I don't want to just be this, going from contract to contract to contract. So that's what I released the first app. And then also, eventually within the next year or two, just stopping contracting altogether and just working on, on Overpass stuff. So producing a lot of our own apps, and this is kind of where we are now, right? So, there was a lot of changes, right? And there's always these milestone birthdays. Because the thing is, I'm 45 now. I know in 5 years' time, when I turn 50, oh man, I'm gonna completely lose it. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Maybe I'll dye my hair. Maybe I'll start wearing gold chains. I don't know. It's up for grabs, right? I'm gonna start. This is the thing. when you're 45, you start looking at Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's when it was 56, or Colonel Sanders, who's much older, right? You don't have anybody else. You start to run out of people to emulate as a business owner. Anyway, so that's just my own things now, right? So, and then I've got, when I got the Mustang a few months ago, this was very much the, I'm getting older. When am I actually going to get this thing? I'm going to get it now. And I joke about it being my midlife crisis car, right? And here's the thing about midlife crises is I love midlife crises. I can't wait till I get full into my midlife crisis, because the thing is, nobody, at least I don't think so, nobody considers themselves to be in the middle of a midlife crisis, right? They just think, I need to make some changes, and it's everybody around them that looks at them and say, he said, his midlife crisis is such a shame, he's not, and what they're saying is, he's not acting the way we expect him to act anymore, right? And I think that's good. I think, I think it's good when you go through those periods of alarm and stress and like, what am I doing with my life? I gotta do something. I gotta get up. I gotta, I can't, I've been in this job too long. I've been doing this too long. I've been, not releasing this app too long. I haven't been building this too long. I spent too long talking about videos and not doing videos, all this kind of stuff. And, and the goal is that the 50-year-old Eric is not going to be the same as the 40-year-old Eric, and the 40-year-old Eric was not supposed to be the same as the 30-year-old Eric. And, and I think it's just great. I love milestone birthdays, and, but I know they're stressful. Anyway, if any of you have the same kind of neurosis around this thing, either if you have one coming up or if you had real trouble getting through one, let me know in the comments. It's one of those things that, it makes me feel less, less strange. And anyway, that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.